Here we are at last. Right where we ought to be.
I know what the disease wants.
Our job is to stay here.
Our job is to survive.
Rod Steiger and Kim Hunter from Planet of the Apes both won Oscars. The guy who wrote the screenplay for Psycho also won an Oscar. And somehow they all agreed to do a low-budget sci-fi horror about a genetic experiment living in a basement. A dying scientist tells her son to destroy all records of something she created called Anthony. Turns out Anthony is his brother, except not human. She'd been splicing human and marine DNA together, and Anthony is what came out. This half-fish thing growing in the house, getting bigger, killing anyone who gets close. The son brings some grad school friends to help clean out the place. You can guess how that goes. What's really impressive here is the creature work. Michael McCracken and Matthew Mungle built the whole thing from scratch. McCracken later did Ticks. Mungle went on to Bram Stoker's Dracula. They made Anthony out of latex with mechanical tentacles and this glistening amphibian texture. There's no optical tricks, no stop motion. Everything had to look wet and organic and physically there in the room. On basically no money, they created something that still looks pretty disturbing 40 years later. The movie made about $2.5 million in January 1987, got a VHS release, and then it was gone. Nobody saw this thing for over 30 years. A company called Synapse Films spent 15 years fighting through legal problems before they could put out a proper 4K restoration in December 2021. Took them 15 years to rescue one movie. Everyone calls this the Bad Fly sequel and moves on, but there's a couple of sequences in here that rank among the most disturbing practical effects of the decade. Chris Wallace had already built the melting Nazi faces for Raiders. He'd done the Gremlins creatures, worked on Dragon Slayer, contributed to Return of the Jedi. Then he did the makeup for Cronenberg's Fly and won the Oscar for it. So when Fox needed someone for the sequel, they went to Wallace. The man had never directed a single thing in his life, but that wasn't the point. The whole reason for this movie's existence was the effects work. Nobody understood the fly creature better than the guy who'd built it. The story follows Martin Brundle, played by Eric Stoltz. He's the son of Jeff Goldblum's character from the first film. Bartok Industries, the company that funded his father's research, has raised Martin in a lab since birth. He ages faster than normal, has genius-level intelligence, inhuman reflexes. The suits at Bartok know there's something wrong with his DNA. They're just watching, waiting to see what happens. What happens is he starts transforming, realizes what they've done, and goes after them. Frank Darabont co-wrote it, but nobody watches this for the writing. Someone said this sequel is structured like an adult film. The plot is just connective tissue between the set pieces everyone actually came to see. There's a scene here when they test the telepods on a golden retriever. The dog enters one pod, exits the other as a writhing, inside-out mass of flesh. And what's really messed up is that it's still alive. You can hear it whimpering. Later in the movie, Martin finds the thing in a cage in the Bartok basement. It's been down there the whole time, still alive, shriveled into this dried-out knot of tissue that used to be an animal. It's the most emotionally devastating practical effect in 80s horror. The dog alone justifies this film's existence. And yes, the dog gets a happy ending eventually, so there's that. Space crew investigates a crashed ship on a distant planet. They find this pyramid structure that reaches into their minds, pulls out their worst fears, and manifests them as real things that kill them. James Cameron was 26 years old, doing his second job for Roger Corman after Battle Beyond the Stars. He'd been hired as production designer, but Cameron noticed the shoot needed someone to handle second unit work, so he volunteered himself and basically invented the job title. He wound up directing a significant portion of what's actually in the finished film. There's a shot in the script where maggots are supposed to crawl across a severed arm. They got live mealworms, put them on a metal plate, and the worms just sat there like lumps. Cameron figured they'd just wire the plate with electricity. So every time cameras rolled, he'd hit the current and suddenly the worms were squirming all over the place. The mealworms aren't what this movie is famous for, though. A character named Demea was scripted to die violently while fighting a creature. Graphic, but not sexual. Problem was, Corman had promised his investors there'd be a sex scene somewhere in the movie. He didn't have one. So he combined the sex scene with the death scene. Demea's fear manifests as this giant maggot thing that assaults her. The director flat out refused to film it. Corman got it shot anyway, just did it all himself. The MPAA gave it an X rating twice. The first X came from the sound effects in another death scene. The sound of bones being crushed was deemed too graphic, so they removed it. And the second X was for that maggot assault sequence. This one is basically Alien, but sexier because it's Roger Corman again. A research station on a distant planet has created something called Subject 20, a genetically engineered organism made from synthetic DNA. And of course, it gets loose. Its feeding process involves injecting a compound that turns your insides into a kind of protein slurry, which it then absorbs. The centerpiece scenes are these extended sequences of bodies liquefying, tissue breaking down into this pulsing organic mush. Robert and Dennis Skotak handled the effects. They'd both go on to work on Aliens, and they went all in. Like, for example, the monster's death involves it puking this thick pink fluid. Whatever they used for that effect actually burned skin on contact. The effects team had to build a wall out of garbage bags to protect themselves and poke the camera lens through a gap. What's remarkable is how much they accomplished with almost nothing new to work with. The sets were James Cameron's designs from Galaxy of Terror, wheeled over and reused. The opening space battle was stock footage pulled from Battle Beyond the Stars. More recycled Galaxy footage shows up throughout. The only things actually new on this production were the uniforms the actresses wore. With that level of recycling, somehow the film still got 3 Saturn Award nominations. Lost to Evil Dead and E.T., but still. 3 nods for a movie assembled almost entirely from leftovers. After some kind of biological or chemical war, most of the population is mutated into creatures people call gargoyles. A small group of survivors live underground in a Mojave Desert research bunker. One day, they rescue a woman from the surface who turns out to be carrying something inside her. She'd been assaulted by one of the gargoyles. This gets dismissed as an alien ripoff, and some of the creature effects do look pretty cheap. But the pregnancy sequence is among the nastiest things the 80s produced. The thing grows impossibly fast. You can see it moving under the skin, and then there's this prolonged delivery that's basically a chestburster riff from Alien. Except through the birth canal, so it's pretty hard to watch. Once the creature's out, it reaches full size within hours and starts hunting through the bunker's ventilation system. Made for almost nothing, earned about $1 million in theaters, did well enough on video for Corman to greenlight a sequel. The Terror Within 2 came out in 1991, with Andrew Stevens directing and starring on about $500,000. Pretty forgettable stuff, except the cinematographer was a guy named Janusz Kaminski. 2 years after shooting this Corman creature movie, Kaminski did the cinematography for Schindler's List and won the Oscar. Year after that, Saving Private Ryan, second Oscar. Back-to-back wins for a guy who'd just been lighting rubber monsters in a desert bunker. A long time before Demi Moore and The Substance, there was this. An aging actress has been bankrolling a scientist's experiments with an anti-aging serum. The formula involves something extracted from human brain tissue. She gets impatient with the testing schedule and demands he inject her immediately. It works. She comes out looking decades younger. But when the effects wear off, she doesn't just revert. She becomes something that needs to consume human brains to get the youth back. And every time she transforms, it gets worse, more monstrous, harder to control, shorter window of looking human. It's structured exactly like Cronenberg's Fly with all the progressing mutations. People at the time called it a cross between Cronenberg and Sunset Boulevard. The whole production cost $250,000, and the movie wasn't built around an actor. It was built around special effects artist Edward French, who had Sleepaway Camp and Creepshow 2 on his resume and would later do Hellraiser Bloodline. The script existed to give French a showcase for what he could do. The finale required a full-body meltdown. French's team did it with about a dozen people in trash bags, operating tubes and bladders and syringes in real time, squeezing everything at exactly the right moments. Literally zero digital effects. Just a room full of crew members covered in garbage bags making the gore happen by hand. After the substance came out, people started tracking down the Rejuvenator again. The director, Brian Thomas Jones, never got another big break. He works as a photographer now and teaches film at a community college, but he still pulls out the Rejuvenator to watch sometimes. David Cronenberg sold Universal on Videodrome with a one-page description. The head of Universal, Sid Sheinberg, read that single page and said, "Yes, we'll distribute this." Then Cronenberg went off and started actually making the movie, except he kept rewriting the script every day right up until they wrapped production. When Sheinberg finally saw what Cronenberg had actually written, he tried to shut the whole production down. But it was too late. They were already filming. Universal was stuck. So they figured they'd at least try to make their money back and gave it a wide release, 600 theaters. They regretted that immediately. Rick Baker did the effects. He'd just won the Oscar for An American Werewolf in London, so he had credibility. He asked for 6 months of prep time. They gave him 2. He asked for a real budget. They gave him $500,000 for everything. His crew was mostly 20-year-olds he'd brought over from American Werewolf, and they built the props out of whatever they could scrounge, including dental dam. Somehow they pulled off props that still genuinely disturb people 40 years later. There's a device in the movie called the image accumulator that pulsates on the main character's head. James Woods was supposed to wear it. He took one look at the thing and refused. He was that frightened of it, so Cronenberg had to put it on himself and stand in for the shots. Leonard Maltin gave the film 2 stars and called the effects icky. That's a real high praise for Rick Baker right there. The entire Reanimator team got back together. Stuart Gordon directing, Brian Usna producing, Dennis Powley writing. Their second Lovecraft adaptation based on a story that's only 7 pages long. They burn through all 7 pages before the opening credits finish. Everything after is pure invention. The movie is about 2 scientists who build a device called the Resonator that stimulates the pineal gland and lets users see creatures from another dimension. The senior scientist gets pulled into that dimension and comes back as a shape-shifting monster that keeps mutating. 4 separate special effects teams worked on the film. The primary guy was John Carl Buechler, who'd done creatures for Roger Corman's Forbidden World and for Troll. He designed all the creature transformations, and the practical stuff holds up beautifully. It's the early digital effects that look rough now. Gordon's team decided to use enormous quantities of slime instead of blood. Their thinking was that the MPAA would find slime less objectionable than gore. But the MPAA found the slime even more disgusting than blood would have been. The film got submitted around 12 times. The board told Gordon he had 10 times too much of everything. Gordon figured they were being punished. Reanimator had dodged certification entirely by releasing unrated, and Gordon suspected the MPAA was trying to get revenge. 1989 gave us 3 underwater creature movies at the same time: Leviathan, Deep Star 6, and The Abyss. Out of all of them, Leviathan has the most impressive creature design, and that's because Stan Winston did the effects. He had a choice to make. James Cameron wanted him for The Abyss. George Cosmatos wanted him for Leviathan. Winston chose Leviathan and turned down Cameron. The movie had serious pedigree behind it. Script by David Peoples, who wrote Blade Runner, and Jeb Stewart, who wrote Die Hard. The story follows an undersea mining crew who discover a scuttled Soviet ship. A flask of vodka from the wreck contains a mutagen. 2 crew members drink it, die, and their corpses merge into a single creature that absorbs victims and keeps growing. It's basically Alien on the ocean floor with the Thing's body horror mechanics. Winston built the creature in a way that makes it genuinely unnerving. He had different members of his team design each stage of the monster's growth independently, without coordinating with each other. So the thing evolves unpredictably. Every time it absorbs someone new, it changes in a direction you don't see coming. The mutations, the body merging, those practical effects are still the film's strongest element. The rest of the movie hasn't aged as well. It's sitting at 11% on Rotten Tomatoes now, but Winston's creature designs remain some of the best body horror of the entire 80s. $60,000. That's what they had to make this entire film, and they created something so disturbing it got banned across half of Europe. The movie starts with a man named Sam Phillips getting abducted by a UFO. 3 years later, an alien creature lands in the English countryside, finds some random woman, and impregnates her through her mouth. What follows is the scene that got the film banned. She gives birth to a full-grown adult man, all in very graphic detail. That man is Sam, rebuilt with alien DNA. The creature effects artist was Francis Coates, who went on to do The Never-Ending Story the very next year. That reverse birth scene is among the most disturbing practical sequences of the entire 80s. A full-grown man emerges from between a screaming woman's legs, covered in slime and amniotic fluid, and they achieved it for almost nothing. The whole production had $60,000 to work with. Most films spend more than that on food for the crew. The UK put it on the Video Nasties list, which was basically a ban. They called it a very unhealthy film. TV Guide gave it 0 out of 4 stars and called it a vile exercise in grotesque special effects. Roger Ebert said it's the kind of movie that gives movies a bad name. Even the director, Harry Bromley Davenport, says he looks back on it with embarrassment now, and it became a cult classic anyway. The Fly started as a Tim Burton project. When Burton left, David Cronenberg took over, and that's how we got one of the greatest body horror films ever made. The movie is about a scientist named Seth Brundle who invents a pair of teleportation pods. They can break matter down and reassemble it somewhere else. One night, drunk and jealous, he decides to test it on himself. He doesn't notice the fly that got into the pod with him. The machine can't tell the difference between one organism and two, so it combines them at the genetic level. At first, Brundle feels incredible, stronger, faster, more energy than he's ever had, and then he starts mutating, slowly turning into some nightmarish fly monster. By the end, there's nothing human left. The thing he's become can only eat by vomiting acid onto food and letting it dissolve before sucking it up. Chris Wallace and his team had 3 months to design the transformation, and they approached it backwards. They sculpted the final insect creature first, then figured out all the stages between human and monster. By the later stages, Goldblum was spending 5 hours a day in the makeup chair. He had to wear 5 pounds of prosthetics. Everything was practical. Nothing was drawn on a computer. Wallace made the creature's eyes melt using condoms filled with jelly and bits of rubber. The acid vomit was dairy and honey, and they delivered it through a tube hidden inside the puppet. The film took home the Oscar for Best Makeup. It grossed $60 million worldwide against a budget somewhere between $9 and $15 million. Cronenberg's highest-grossing film ever.